Hey everybody, Corey here coming at you with another knife review. This time it is of the Spyderco PM2. If you're new around here, consider subscribing so you don't miss out on any of my knife related content. So, this is going to be a review that I think a lot of people who watch my channel might be a little surprised by. Thank you to Tyler over at Everyday EDC for lending me this knife. Otherwise, I probably would have never been able to handle one of my own. So thank you again to Tyler. Yes, this is not my knife. I am generally not a fan of Spyderco's. I have my own reasons. But I wanted to, take this opportunity to review this knife. So, here's something. Well, here, let's do the size comparisons first. Here it is next to a Reich 1902, which is my relatively large knife for comparison purposes right now. And here it is next to an Ontario Rat number 2, which is my relatively small knife for comparison purposes right now. If you want to see a full list of specs, I'll link them down in the description, but the ones that most people are concerned about, we have an overall length on the PM2 of 8.28 inches and a blade length of 3.44 inches. So it's pretty conventional mid-size knife. So now, I'm going to remove one of these comparison knives from the picture. However, I'm going to keep another comparison knife in the picture. And the reason for that is because, and this is the part that a lot of people might be confused or surprised by, when I was trying to come up with the review for the PM2, I started reminding myself of a lot of the things that I thought and said about the Ontario Rat number 2. Now, of course, these knives are completely different price points. They are not meant to be compared to one another necessarily, and they don't necessarily serve the same purpose in someone's EDC. However, there's a little bit of something that I kind of had a feeling before I got the PM2, but I didn't want to make any judgments until I actually had the knife in my hands and I started handling it. Similar to the Ontario Rat number 2, the Spyderco PM2 does something, which is it kind of reminds me of a Honda Civic in the sense that it seems to be good at everything, maybe great at a few things, but it really didn't blow my mind. And I hate to be a blasphemer in the world of, people who love Spyderco knives, but the PM2 has a lot going for it. But in my experience and in my time carrying the knife, it's not my favorite. And I have a lot of other knives in my collection that do every single individual knife quality a little bit better in some way than the PM2 does, except for one, which I will get to. So in terms of, let's get the Rat out of the picture now, because I think you got the point. In terms of ergonomics, I heard a lot of people before I had this knife say, oh my God, the ergonomics, they're great. They're so great, and it's so comfortable to hold, and, blah, blah, blah. The ergonomics, they're so great. It could just be me, because everyone has different sized hands, and every knife fits people differently. But for me, this palm swell, actually, it's just a little large for me. It kind of makes it's pressing a little too far up against my middle fingers, and it makes me feel like I have less of a grip on the knife because it's putting me in a position that I feel like it's unnatural. It's not what I'm used to. Some people love this. A lot of people love this, actually. I can get behind this little upswept portion here. A lot of people like that because it helps you keep your grip on the knife and it stops your pinky from slipping down. I agree. That's very nice, and it works out. This finger choil, however, the finger choil is something that a lot of people, you praise it for. And again, it's good. I like the fact that I can choke up a little bit higher on the knife with the finger choil, but something just feels a little off to me on the ergonomics. It doesn't sit in my hand like it was made for my hands. And it's not just knocking on Spyderco, because I've held a Delica and I've held an Endura. And I specifically remember that the Delica and the Endura, they felt great in my hand. There's something about the PM2, and I think I might know what it is, we'll get to that in a second, that just, it's not quite right. It's not bad, but it just feels like something is off. One of the things that I love about all Spydercos that they always seem to do well is their jimping. They manage to make extremely aggressive jimping, but because it's so fine and it's spread out over so many, I don't know, what do you call it? Jimps, individual jimps, dare I say. Even though it's very aggressive and it really does help you get a great grip on the knife, it doesn't hurt. It does not hurt at all. There's nothing uncomfortable about this. So I do like that. Let's talk about why I think this knife is a little bit uncomfortable for me. I'm going to get out the Reich again because it's just what I have next to me. The Reich. Let's look at the edges, right? You just take a quick glance at the edges and look at the overall geometry of the handle of this knife. And hey, if you don't like this knife, let's get out another one that, thank you again, Tyler lent to me. Let's look at this Benchmade Super Freak. Look at the handles on the Benchmade Super Freak, right? There's something that should, be pretty clear to you when you're comparing these other knives to the PM2. And this is something that I'm like, how have we not gotten away from this? What's up with these edges? Huh? I mean, they're technically, right? They're technically chamfered. They're technically rounded just a little bit so that it's not like a straight up sharp edge. It's not like the inside of the liner, but it's so flat. All the edges come to this weird, abrupt stop. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, where's my scalloping here? Where's my scalloping here? Where's my contouring on the handle? Because I don't know about you guys, but my hand isn't flat. It's round. And that's why something like this, it just feels so much more comfortable than this. And I know they're capable of making a knife with contoured edges. And with a flagship knife like the PM2, I'm just kind of like, why don't we have rounded edges? Why don't we have contoured edges? I think that's what's throwing me off the most, because my guess is this palm swell wouldn't bug me so much if my hands were rounded over it. But because it's so flat, this whole edge, the whole back of the knife, it's so flat. It's weird. So that's what I'll say about the Ergos. I think, I don't know, it just doesn't do it for me on the Ergos. Let's talk about what the knife does well. Sorry, a little bit of burping action going on here. This knife cuts better than any other knife that I own. Easy. Easy peasy, no questions asked. Now, Spyderco does a full flat grind very well. And I tried to stay, I resharpened this. I tried to stay with the angle that was on the knife when I received it, but it came out to about 16 or 17 degrees, which is a pretty darn shallow angle. So one, you've got a shallow angle. It doesn't surprise me that it's going to cut well. But two, Spyderco has a very aggressive full flat grind on that blade that is contributing to it being so thin behind the edge. This knife treetops hairs off of my arm without me even feeling it. Of course, that's after I sharpen it, but the blade geometry itself lends the knife to being a very slicey knife, a knife that cuts well. So I will give it that. Spyderco's full flat grind, it seems like it can't be beat. It seems like the working edge that they give you on these knives, it's just crazy. It cuts well and it lasts a long time. Some other things, if you guys aren't familiar with Spyderco, they have this interesting habit of not putting a sharpening choil on their knives. Which for me, as someone who sharpens my own knives, it's kind of annoying. I see a lot of people modify their own knives using something like a diamond file to put their own sharpening choil in there, but it's just a quality of life thing that I would have really liked to have seen. But you could say that about any of their knives. It's clearly a design decision that they've chosen to stick with, but it's just one that I'm not that into. The Spidey hole, I can't complain about the Spidey hole, right? Because it's what Spyderco does. I'm not good at Spidey flicking the knife, but it serves its purpose. You can open it perfectly well using your thumb by either flicking it open or just walking it open like that, or you can use the compression lock and just whip it open like that. The compression lock, it's not the worst thing in the world. I see the appeal. I do like it. It kind of functions like a backwards liner lock. I do like that you can access it. Sorry. I like that you can access it without getting your fingers in the path of the blade at all. However, I did this in my compression lock versus axis lock video. What I would really like to see on a lock like this, you can see with the Spyderco, as I close it, it's kind of hard to catch sometimes. And that's because by the time it is falling into place with the lock, that's how close you have to be. So if you want to whip this knife closed and kind of fidget with it, you're always going to kind of run into the situation where it, you either have to catch it perfectly or it closes like that and you have to tap it closed. Whereas with something like the Benchmade, the Axis lock, it kind of sucks the knife in, and this is just due to the design of the knife, but it kind of sucks the knife in. Yeah, see right there? That's very generous, because if you're someone who likes to fidget with your knives, that means you get a much larger margin of error on something like a Benchmade for your fidgeting purposes. So, but other than that, I mean, I have no problems with the compression lock. It's nice. It's a lock. It does what it needs to do. That's all I can really say. The action on this, it's fine. And here's what this comes down to. The steel is fine. The action is fine. The ergos are fine. The overall design, the fit and finish, it's fine. The blade grind is great. And I'm not going to purposefully, I'm not going to complain about too much. I think these edges really are what's holding this knife back for me. Give me some contouring, okay? These knives are relatively expensive. Give me some contouring on this to let it live up to the hype. But, like I said, this is the first thing I thought of. Ironically, even though we're talking about knives at vastly different price points, the PM2 makes me think of the Rat 2. I look at the Rat 2 and I say, the ergos are fine. The action is fine. The blade steel is fine. The grind is fine. The Rat actually does contouring or wider chamfers better than the PM2 does, in my opinion. But, I think with all the hype out there, I was expecting the PM2 to, completely blow my mind, blow me out of the water. And it ended up just kind of giving me Rat vibes. And I'm probably going to get a lot of hate for that. But, I think, like I originally said, there are so many knives that does what the PM2 is trying to do just a little bit better. The one thing that I can give the PM2 is the blade grind. Very slicey, very nice in that regard. But you know what? If you're going for a knife with, sex appeal, boom, you've got a ton of options like this, where you start getting carbon fiber, brass accents, a little bit sexier of a blade, some milling, some contouring, some of the finer details like this fancy pocket clip, things like that. If you're going for a workhorse, I don't want to do Benchmade versus Spyderco in this video, but I mean, this is just so much more comfortable. The ergos on this are so much more comfortable, and it's I feel like for some reason the PM2 has become such an iconic knife that they've just kind of left it alone. And I feel like in 2020, we're at the point where it's okay, guys, this was great, but, call it what you want. PM2, V2, call it the PM4, I don't know. I just think the knife is showing its age, and it is a classic, and maybe it should stay around. Maybe the PM2 should stay around, but I feel like the knife world is ready for some improvements here. So that's my opinion on the PM2. I hope you guys got something out of this, and if you've been considering the knife, like I said, I'm not saying it's a bad knife. I mean, if you think you like it and you handle it and you end up liking it, then good for you. Get the knife. But for me, I just wanted to kind of convey, I think a lot of people might end up getting a PM2 thinking that it's going to be oh my God, they pick it up and they're oh, it's everything I ever dreamed of. But, for me, it's fine. That's what I get out of the PM2. It's fine. I would love to see Spyderco implement some of the improvements that I mentioned and see how that goes, because I do think this knife has the capacity to be the best knife in the world. But I feel like it's stuck in a time warp, a few years back, and it's time for some changes to be made. So there you go. Sorry, a little bit mini rant at the end. Hope you guys enjoyed again, and I will see you guys next time.